Okay. So the beginning of Amud Aleph of Daf He, we're continuing with the lists. Mishnah gave a list of 4, Rabbi Shaya gave a list of 13, and the last rabbi gave a list of, Rabbi gave a list of 24. So we're asking how come Rabbi Shaya didn't list those ones that we were talking about. We started a few, we're continuing now. According to the Rabbi Shia, it's a case of money, which we said that's what he's listing. Edim Zomin also should be a case of money, therefore it should be listed. How come he didn't list it? So the Gemara says, Savar la Rabbi Akiva, he holds like Rabbi Akiva. Damar em mishalmin al pi atzman. Edim Zomin don't pay on their own admitting, right? So which means that if they went to a different bedin and said, hey, we were convicted as Edim Zomin, they don't have to pay. They're only paid if they're convicted in the court and they're proven that they're Edim Zomin. So therefore, we see that it's not an actual mamon, it's more like a kinas. That's why it wasn't mentioned. He said, short. You should hold the 2 types of short damages. That one, litany short, the azik short. Let him mention the case of a short that's damaging a short. Litany short, the azik adam. Let him teach the case of a short damaging a person. The Tanakh Mishnah says, right? We'll see that because it has to be one of them has to be mamon. Done. Even if a tam, a non-attacking animal, hit a wounded man, he has to pay the entire full amount of money. So how come that case wasn't considered nezek shalim, which means it's mamon, right? You're not paying double or half because of the penalty. You're paying full price. That's mamon. How come he didn't mention it? The Gemara says, right? He's already qualified that ruling, which means it literally means like he physically he broke his fist. That's what it would say, but it means that he would have to technically pay from his assets, not from his cash, right? So if the animal damage, you'd have to pay maybe from the animal, right? You don't have to pay from the actual ox that damaged. That was the chidush over there, which means not a case of regular mamon. The Tanya, the person says, maybe you might think if an ox damaged a man, you'd have to pay from your top real estate, right? Like we mentioned in the Mishnah, if you're paying from real estate, you have to pay from your top real estate. It shall be done to it. You could pay from the actual animal. You could sell the ox, slaughter the ox and sell it, etc. And you could pay from the actual animal. You don't have to sell from your Manhattan real estate. Next case. How come by the case of rapist, seducer, or moti shemra mentioned as a case of a guy who got married to a bitula, and he says the next day that his wife wasn't a bitula, she was a bitula. He's complaining. If he found out to be lying, we charge him 50 shekel or more to the father. So now how come in these cases he was all charged? He has to pay cash. So how come Rabbi Shaya didn't teach this as a case of Mammon? Where it says why? Well, regardless of what you say, either way you look at it, it won't be a good question. Why? Because it would say as follows. 1 second. Either way you look at it, the question doesn't make sense. Because if you're talking about an actual damage, he already told you that damage, you're chayav as an av. If it's referring to that you're paying because of the girl's pain, you seduced her, or you raped her, or you testify that she wasn't a betula, and you're paying because of pain. We also had a case of the ta'ar already by Rabbi Shia. If it's also referring to humiliation, Rabbi Shia already told you. And if you're talking about that she's considered as if she was raped, she's considered a damaged goods chas v'shalom, but she's her depreciation as a woman, then also it's considered nezek. So what payment would you put it under? Because if it's any of those cases, Rabbi Shia already mentioned those cases or those forms of payment. Where it says kinasa must be tomar kinas, but the kinas will kamari, and even if it's kinas, Rabbi Shia already said that I'm not mentioning kinasas, I'm only mentioning mammon. That's why he didn't mention it. Next, right? Someone who makes someone else's teruma tameh, or someone who mixed teruma with Israel's fruits. So if I have fruit and someone takes teruma and mix it with my apples, I don't know which one's which. I have to sell it to Kohen for a cheap price. I don't know which one's teruma or not. Or if I make someone items yain nesech. So how come that's case of one, and how come Rosh didn't teach it? The Gemara says manafshach. Right, this is a famous concept. If if it's a damage that's not considered visible damage, right? I believe we had this in Sota. What's considered damage? If I damage something, but it's not visibly damaged, if I change the halachic background of it, is that considered damage or not? Or is damage only if I break something? Right. So all these cases of making something tameh, mixing something, or making yain nesach, is it the same item as before? Yes. Did I damage it per se? Maybe not. It's machloket. Does damage have to be considered recognizable or not? So if you hold it's not considered damageable, sorry, if it is considered real damage, then it's already considered part of Rosh Hashanah's case of nezek. And if it is not considered damage, it's considered a knas of the knas and we're not talking about knas. So we see that Bechia holds that it's not considered hezek, because if Bechia had to mention it, that means the first time it wasn't good enough to say nezek, which means he had to mention it again. So maybe he holds that it's not considered nezek, and therefore he holds it's knas. That's why he had to mention it. So basically, we're trying to say in that big machloket of hezek she'eno nikar, unrecognizable damage, considered damage. In that machloket, can we prove from our Gemara over here that Rabbi Chia holds that it's not considered damage because he had to bring it as a separate case to nezek? So Gemara says, no, he doesn't have to be taking a side because he could be even talking about two types of cases of damage: recognizable damage and not recognizable damage. With that doesn't mean he's necessarily taking a side of whether or not it's considered hezek, she'enu nikar, shmei hezek or not. So we try to bring a proof, not a proof. Okay. Based on the Tanakh, our understanding of the Mishnah makes sense. It said 4 to exclude Rabbi Oshia additional cases. Rabbi Oshia mentioned 13 cases. He wanted to exclude Rabbi Achia's last 11 cases. Why did Rabbi Chia have to say you have 24? Just mention your 11 and that's it. You see the Ma'ute Moser Mifagel. This is coming to exclude someone who damages someone else by being a Moser, with Moser and his friend, and his property got confiscated, for example. He snitched. Or if he made someone else's item pigul, right? So if a Kohen has to bring a korban, for example, and his friend says, hey, can you bring this korban for me? And he messes it up on purpose. He has the wrong kavanah, whatever it is, messes it up. So that's also considered, that's something called pigul. So those type of damages, Shia mentioned, is not considered part of the Mishnah, or not his part of the 24. He said 24, not 26. Litany, how come Rabbi Shia didn't include him? Mentions, I understand Mifagel that he made something pigul, because maybe you could say that he's not referring to Kuchim. How come we didn't mention the case of an informant? The guy who snitches on someone to the government. Seems like a good way of teaching an av. The Torah says, Shani Moser de Dibura. A Moser is different because that's damaging via verbalization, not action. But Dibura lo kamar, we're not talking about Dibur. The guy who testified that his wife was not a bitula, falsely testifies. That's also considered Dibur, and we mentioned it, the Ketani. I said, no, Dibur de Ibn Ma'aseh. Talking about a case, I mean, not talking about a case. That scenario has a ma'aseh also. They got married, they lived together, and the next day he wakes up and says, there was no betulim. That's like there's a ma'aseh involved, which an informant doesn't have. If ha'edim don't mean, also a case of ha'edim don't mean. Right? It's a dibur with no ma'aseh. It's just testimony. You were with me, right? So Gemara says Viktanian mentioned it. So how come Rabbi Chia mentioned it? Even though technically there is no ma'aseh by testifying. Rahmana kare ma'aseh. The Torah does mention the word ma'aseh over there. Dichtiv. Va'asitem lo kasher zamam la'asot la'achir. You shall do to him what he wanted and he plotted to do to his brother. So mention the word ma'aseh over there. So therefore, even though there's no actual ma'aseh, but the Torah mentions the word ma'aseh, so therefore it's considered ma'aseh. Okay. Our Mishnah says 4 because there's 4 avot, which means there are todot as well. Avot mechad ikatadot to 10 mahu. What are the todot of their avot? What does that mean? It says that not necessarily there are todot for each one. We all got scared that they're not to bring in 19 more cases of todot to match each av. No, they're saying that it's an av. Not that there are similar cases that are todot for these 19 other items that Rechiya and Roshia bring, but rather they have this similar halacha of an av, that what? You have to pay from your superior land. My tama. Why? Atya tahat netina yishalem kesef. There's a Gereshva from the word tahat netina yishalem and kesef, mentioned by all different parts of these cases of the oxen and stuff. And therefore, because all those words are mixed together with all these type of cases of damages, we mentioned that the damages have to all be paid through all these cases. So just like the top four have to be paid with the top superior land, so too all of them do. Okay, next part of the Mishnah. Ox is not like mave. My kama, what does it mean? Why do we need to write both of these? The Torah should have written one of them, and we can learn one from the other. Where it says, therefore, the Mishnah said, no, you cannot learn one from each one. That's why it brought a different common denominator and a different contrast between each one. This one's special because of this reason, and this one's special for a different reason. To teach you that don't ask me how come they are not able to learn out from each other. Next. The ox and maveh, which are living things, are not comparable to the other ones. My kamar, amarav mishar shem mishmei kamar means to say as follows. Maybe the Torah should have only written ox and mav'eh, and let the other one, fire, be learned from them. We say, no, you can't learn from these two. And regarding to all these damagers, bor, right? In regarding to all these damages, compared to, or contrasted to bor, the pit, right? So if you are looking at it in that, if you're looking at it, they all should be able to learn from the common denominator that you are chayav on your item, that you have responsibility to watch over. The varmi keren, which is the exception of keren, which you can't learn from that. So mishum de ikla mifrach, because the reason why keren does not work from that, because malakul shekin mu'adin mitchilatan, because keren is not the mu'ad right away. It has a special case of tam. You have three strikes. So therefore, Luman Damar Adaraba Keren Nadifan, according to the opinion, holds that Keren is better. Because he wants to damage. I feel Keren Nami Ate, you could even learn Keren from pit. Right? So therefore, why did the Torah write them separately if technically we're able to learn all of them from Bor, according to the last opinion of Keren? The hilchotehen, to teach each halacha separately for each halacha that applies to it. Like why? Keren l'chalik ben tamal l'muadet. We taught Keren to teach you the tam and muad. Shen v'regel lepotran b'shtarabim. Shen and regel we're teaching you because they are patur if it happened in public property. Bor liftor bor takilim. Bor is patur, is taught to teach you that you're patur from kilim. If something kilim falls inside, this is like a month and a half later on to learn about it. And according to Bida, who holds that vessels are chayav for damages in the pit, liftor both of them, it's teaching you your patur of someone who dies, a person who dies. And then we mention a person, teach you that you're chayav on the four things: the damage, poshet, ripui, right, embarrassment, etc. Esh, you took fire, liftor both tamun, to teach you that you're only chayav for things that are visible, but things that are hidden and you're not. For example, if the guy decided to hide his safe inside the haystack and your fire burnt his haystack, but the safe wasn't visible, all the money got burnt, you're patur. So that's why we have to bring down Esh. On this came out Tamun B'Kesh Natu. According to Bida, who holds you are chayav for hidden items by fire, why do you have to mention it? It teaches you another chidush that if even though if something does damage, even though it wasn't supposed to do damage, something that wasn't flammable, an empty field or stones that got damaged from fire, which shouldn't have, you're still chayav. Okay, we'll stop here.